Okay, so we're in the middle of Perek Kaf Gimel. Thanks for coming, guys, tonight. I know I try to stick with Wednesdays, but I had back to school night last night. I got home at about 10:30. Um, so here we are. We're in the middle of talking about Anava, and right now we're going to be discussing mostly things to stay away from and things that cause a person to be haughty and to make it much more difficult to acquire Anava. So he says, "V'alakol yisbonin tamid lahakir chulshas hasechel ha'anoshi." Says a person you should think and realize kind of the frailty of a person's intellect. I mean, the fact that you might think you know a lot, but you don't really know so much. V'rov ta'usav v'chuzavav, and how many mistakes you actually would make in terms of coming to conclusions and how much stuff you think you know, but you actually don't know. Because you're actually so much further from the actual truth, from where you think you are. Alkane, therefore he says, Yira tamid me'asakana hazos. A person should kind of be like, should recognize this and have like a fear. I think here is referring to like the year of like the fear of this danger. And a person should learn from someone and should constantly listen to advice from people in order not to stumble. Meaning you have to realize that you don't have all the answers, and you want to make sure that you recognize as much as you think you have the answers, you probably don't, and you want to have people to turn to who will be able to guide you properly. And this is what Chazal said. Who's a wise person? Someone who learns from everyone. Obviously, he's discussing this here because a person who is a Baal Gaiva, they don't think that it's worthwhile to learn from other people because they have all the answers. I know it all. I could do everything. So someone who's an Ana recognizes, I'm limited in what I know, what I can understand. I want to get people around me who can help me. It says in Mishlei, Parakabez Pasuk Tavav, Shomer le'etza chacham. Someone who listens to advice is a wise person. Achi says, Mafside Hamida Zos, who have riboy vasvia betovos ha'olam hazeh. Now he discusses the detriments of a person to become a Balgaiva and to make it much more difficult to be in Anav. First thing is the physical world, is the pleasures of the physical world. Inyan hakasuv shebeperish omer, pen tochal b'savata, ram levavecha v'gomer. As the Torah tells us in Sefer Dvarim, Parak Chet, that Hashem warns you that when you get into Eretz Yisrael and you have everything you need and all is good, so you might come to forget me, says Hashem, and you're going to grow, meaning Ram Levalecha, you're going to grow haughty, and then you're going to come to forget me. You're going to say, I could do it on my own. Oftentimes, it's natural for a person, let's say, who does have a certain talent or skill, or is a successful businessman or lawyer, whatever it may be, and they feel they did it themselves. And the more successful they become, unfortunately, the more of a Balgaiva they are, the more they kind of feel like it's not Hashem who's helping me out. I was able to do this for myself. I was just that Ellie, I was telling you before we recorded, that colleague in Lakewood. So that colleague in Lakewood, he happens to be a very, very big musician. He was a drummer and played with a lot of Jewish musicians. And he told me he reads about or listens to things related to Jewish musicians. And he said to me, he spoke to someone who, I'm trying to remember what the person did. The person was in the Jewish music scene for years. And he said, of all the musicians since like the 70s and 80s, He says Avraham Fried is probably one of the only people, I think I said the only person, who has like so much fame and yet is just as humble as he was when he started out. That's what this person told my friend, my colleague. And sometimes, of course, meaning it's much more natural for a person where you become very popular, people love you, people are constantly complimenting you, and then obviously it could lead a person to a certain amount of gaiva, and to feel as if this is me. Like, look what I was able to accomplish, like kind of forgetting Hashem. Alkain, therefore. Therefore, the Hasidim, obviously not literal Hasidim, but someone who wants to be stronger in their connection to Hashem, someone who's very pious. So that person, they sometimes will fast in order to afflict themselves. In order so that they don't have gaiva, which can naturally come from excess, from having so many things, from being so comfortable. So when a person takes on a fast and like all day you're hungry and you recognize, my sustenance is from Hashem, like, or the fact that I'm so frail without this one thing, it puts a person more in place and grounds them, let's say. Okay, it says in Gemara Brachos and Daf Lam Beis Amud Aleph, Ein Ari no him mitoch kupa shel teven and mitoch kupa shel basar. A lion doesn't roar and go wild for a basket of straw. Rather, it's for a basket of meat. Meaning, when something is very substantial and exciting, that's where like commotion happens and what could be taken away. So over here, when a person is let's say within the physical world, the example he's giving, if a person is not enjoying all the pleasures of the world, so you're not gonna roar, you're not gonna I'll read here the way the footnote explains it. There's a metaphor for man's tendency to react to abundance of material good by abandoning his normal constraints and humility. And a person will normally might be humble, but then when something comes along, they will lose their humility. When a lion has abundance of meat before it, it can become crazed with excitement, roaring and attacking nearby animals. Okay. Vihine, Rosh Kolamafsidim, who asichlos umiyat hadeya hamitis. That at the forefront, like one of the main things regarding the impediments of anava is ignorance and miyat hadeya hamit, and a person who really lacks knowledge. Because gaiva is found, the greater the bal gaiva is found by the greater the ignorance in the person. It's interesting. So a lot of times we would assume, and like the examples I was giving until now, right? A person accomplishes, and you're like, I mean, he was saying from that pasuk in Devarim, but a person accomplishes, and then you come to forget Hashem, you think it's all you. But something the opposite is almost also true. A person doesn't accomplish, not that type of opposite, but a person, they're not very intelligent, but they think they know it all. I have a story for you, which I'll share shortly. So I want to do a little more, then I'll get to the story. Amru Simon Legazas Haruach Anias HaTorah. That one of the Gemara Sanhedrin and Kaftal Aleph says that a sign for a person who's haughty is a person who's like poor of Torah. They have no Torah in them. That's sometimes a sign of a bal guy. Amru Simon Dela Yada Klum Shaboche. That a person who doesn't know anything, so Shaboche, he's gonna praise himself. The Imru Od Istara Balagena Kish Kish Karya. That if you take a coin and you put it into a jar and you shake up the jar, it's going to make a lot of noise. Obviously, if there's a lot of coins in there, a full jar, it's not going to make any noise when you shake it. If you have one coin in there, it makes a lot of noise, right? So here, a person has like a little bit of Torah, so they're going to make a lot of noise if they know a lot, and kind of flaunt themselves. Od Amru. Shaluli the Ilone Sarak, that they asked. Obviously, there's a metaphor because the trees don't talk, but a barren tree, a tree that does not bear fruits. Nema kolchem nishma. That how come you're heard? How come you're heard this way? It's referring to the fact that when the wind blows, so they sway, and you hear the leaves, I guess, rustle. Amru, they said, Halvaya kolei nishma b'ni zacher. Hopefully someone will hear us and remember us. We're not going to be forgotten, meaning we don't bear fruits. We don't have that people come and care about us really. So we'll make some noise, right? So it's similar over here. The other examples where when a person doesn't have Torah, so you kind of you're making a lot of noise, like look how much I know. I actually think I told this to you at some point for the last year, but I had a student, her name's not Sarah, but we'll call her Sarah. I taught her, it wasn't last year, about 2 years ago. So she was in my class 2 years ago. And I literally had like an experience when I started preparing and I was reading this. I was like, this is that girl. where she had, I can't even remember if she asked a good question or not, but she was asking, and like someone brought up, like, could women be rabbis? Okay, it's a good question, important question. But then she says, like, I mean, I should be a rabbi. Like, I know, like I said, like I know what you know. Like I know a lot. And there were other things she said. It's been 2 years, but since that started, I remember her just like feeling as if like she literally knows all of Torah and like there's nothing to teach her. And and I remember thinking, obviously, a lot of times the less someone knows, the more they think they know. That's like a perfect example. I also remember, let's say when I went Shana Aleph, it's not where I thought I knew everything. Definitely wasn't that, but I definitely didn't realize how much there is to know. In the beginning, it's like, okay, yeah, I've learned Chumash, like I learned a few Mishnayot, I learned Gemara, like I have it all. It's like you don't realize how big Gemara is, how big Mishnayos are, and you also don't know so much of other Torah. They've literally never even heard of. One of my Rebbeim, when he gives Musar to like Shon Aleph kids, so one of the things he says sometimes is he'll bring up Masechtas that people literally never heard of. Not to like make them feel bad per se, but like you have to realize like how much you have to grow. He's like, do you even know what Horios is? Like he'll do something like that. Horios, Edios, like or like things like that. Okay. Going weiter. So obviously, if you have someone who knows a little, like we were discussing, that person's a big Baal Gaiva, the opposite is what we see as factual. Moshe Rabbeinu knew the most, and yet was the Torah testify about him that he's the most humble, right? So sometimes having the most, um, it actually can make a if a person obviously working on their midos the right way, as Moshe Rabbeinu certainly did, so then they become humble with that. Continuing on. Od mafside hanava who is chabros o ishtamef b'vnei adam chanefim asher lignov libo b'chanufusam l'man yitav lahem yishapchu v'yormemuhu. This is talking about sometimes people surround themselves with others who flatter them or they flatter because you want something from them. If you think about, we're all, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I have definitely been guilty of this, right? Sometimes if I'm with a person, it might be my boss or my boss's boss or someone who I want to impress, and I might give them a certain compliment. Hopefully it'll be a true compliment, but sometimes it might be something that I wouldn't necessarily have said to someone else, but like, okay, this is the person I want to impress. I want them to like me. So he says, min you're praising up this person, and you're exaggerating their milos. And you might even add and bring up something that they don't even have at all. They don't even have that midah that you're or that praise is not even genuine. Like, oh man, like wow, that food was delicious. Obviously, that might be more of a unique case because you don't want to lie and tell the host the food was terrible. But I think you understand if you were by someone you really want to impress, and you didn't have to say that, but at certain times you might say certain things that might even lie. And sometimes they might even attain the opposite of what you're praising them for. So you might praise a person for like, wow, that was an amazing shiur, whatever it might be, and really this person is a terrible public speaker, and there wasn't anything really so novel or so interesting that you learned from the shiur, whatever it may be. Vihine, sof das adam kala, that a person is easily swayed. V'tivo chalash mispata b'nakal, and our nature is weak, and we could be swayed easily. Certainly related to something that a person has more of a natural ability in. So if someone might have a little bit of a certain skill set, so then if someone's praising them in that area, of course they're gonna be swayed. Especially if the person who it's coming from is a person they trust. I'm speaking to my employee, and it must be, yeah, he knows me well. Of course, this is true. And it enters a person like poison and venom. And the person enters the trap of gaiva and is broken spiritually. Because when a person is constantly hearing these praises from people, and they will end up oftentimes being false, sometimes being the opposite of, not just false, but the opposite of the truth. And either way, this person's ego becomes inflated by this, and it's almost impossible for a person to be an unav after hearing this. Harei lanu, and he brings a story here. Harei lanu, Yoash asher hitiv lasos kol yemei horaho Yehoyada hakohen Rabbo. Yoash was one of the sons of David. He was actually hid in the Beis Hamikdash for 6 years. And people, as we'll hear, basically, he doesn't go into so many of the details here, but after his Rebbe died, Yehuda HaKohen, Achrei Mos, I'll read from here for this part, Achrei Mos Yehoyada, Bo Avadav, his students and slaves came to him, Itchilu, not students, but like the people who worked for him, Itchilu Hachniflo Hagdil Hilulav, and they were praising him, building him up, Dimuhu Leloha, until they compared him to like a god. Shama Hamelach Aleim, then he ended up listening to them. And this is what ended up happening, to bring Avodah Zarah in, and to spread Avodah Zarah. The way they're able to do that was by praising him, by winning him over, and part of the praise was about how when he was younger, since people wanted to kill David and his family, so he was hidden, and he was hidden in the Beis Hamikdash. Like, wow, you were in the Kosh HaKadoshim, you weren't even killed. Wow, you must be like the holiest person ever. And those were some of the praises, and that's how they were able to convince him to kind of say yes to whatever they needed. The tira, zehadavar v'berer. This is something you could see clearly in all times. Kirov hasar v'amalachim okol balei hayacholos. That all people, all kings, all people who have power nowadays, if this was written, we would use the word. I mean, it still could be back then. Also, there are politicians, but all politicians, all CEOs, you be'eza madrega shiu, for at whatever level they are, they stumble, they become corrupt because of all the false praise that and all the praise that the flattery that they're constantly being given, now the receiving end of. Alkain, Misha Einav Birosho. He says a person who Einav Birosho is like a person who has their head on straight. Obviously, here it's referring like your eyes in your head, but that's a modern expression. Someone has their head on straight, someone who's thinking properly. Yoter Yizahar V'yayin Masei Misha Rotza Leknoso Lo Lechaver O Liyowetz. That this person, something. that he has to like think carefully for a person he wants to make sure is his friend or take advice from. The fact that he's the head of the household. More than you have to be more careful with who you surround yourself basically with, then more careful than what you eat. Because when it comes to food and drinks, that could harm your body. But your friends and your administrators, that could destroy your soul, your possessions, and your honor. If you think about a lot of times in the celebrity world, so a lot of people, athletes, celebrities, will have their posse, their chevra, as we would say, and oftentimes, obviously, they may have been friends beforehand, but I'm sure part of the reason they're there is for the money. This person, my friend, became famous. Like, let me join with them. And a lot of these celebrities end up throwing away tons of their money because their posse, their group, just gets so big, and they're going to expensive places and like buying fancy dinners and gifts for all their friends, and not realizing probably that if they didn't have the money, they probably wouldn't have had those friends necessarily. The David HaMelech Alav Shalom Omer, David HaMelech said in Tehillim, Parakaf Aleph, Pasuk Zayin, Lo Yishay B'Kar Beisi Oser Miya. I don't sit close in my house, meaning I don't bring close to me anyone who's like deceitful, anyone who lies. Holech B'Derech Tamim Hu Yishar Seni. Someone who's tamim, someone who's honest, someone who has integrity, someone who's tzaddik, that person should serve me. You want to make sure David HaMelech to surround himself by people who embody the proper midos, and having a chevra and a holy chevra is an extremely important thing. We don't realize the influence that a chevra has on us. The ein tov la'adam ela shivakesh lo chaverim tmimim she'airu einav v'mashehu iverbo. There's nothing greater than having a pure, a good chevra who is able to help you with when you're blinded by certain things. That they could give you tochacha, they could rebuke you out of love. V'nimtzu matzilim osomi kol ra, they could save you from all things that are bad. Kimash eina adam yachal leros, from certain things that you can't save. Because you're unable to see the faults within yourself. Him yiru v'yavinu v'yazhiruhu v'nishmar, and they will see, they'll understand, they're able to warn you and to guard you. And with this, Shlomo Melech said, wrote in Mishlei Parakaf Daled Pasuk Vav, Uteshua Berov Yoetz. The salvation will comes when Berov Yoetz. I don't think it's not referring to Mashiach here. Like salvation is in abundant counsel, by having advisors around you who know what they're doing. That's something that could really help. So certainly chava is very important, and we learned a lot about nivas in terms of what to stay away from, what to acquire, and proper ways of thinking about it. We should be zochet it, whatever level we can. We're going to be learning next week, the next parak that discusses yiras hachit, fear of sin.